Hi, welcome to Relish Books and my book versus movie take on Anne of Green Gables. I am talking about the Megan Follows version of Anne of Green Gables. I know there are probably some other versions out there, but none of them count to me. This is the only one that is the legitimate one, in my opinion. So, book versus movie. I grew up watching Anne of Green Gables and reading the book. I don't even remember which came first for me. They're both, like many men and women, particularly women across the world, this is a story that I've always known and is very nostalgic. It's not like it's my favorite book in the world or favorite movie in the world, but it's special. So, as most everybody knows, it's the story of a young orphan girl with a big personality and a big imagination coming to Prince Edward Island and being accidentally adopted by a kind of crotchety old brother and sister, Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert. They meant to adopt a boy, and instead Anne is sent to them, and of course they decide to keep her. Really, the story is just, it's classified as a children's classic, but other than that, it would probably be classified as a coming of age story, just a growing up, day-to-day life kind of story. It doesn't have a major plot line, which I think is pretty difficult when you go to turn it into a movie, because there isn't like a definite plot line. There isn't like a momentum that's pushing it along. It's just Anne growing up, going from her loneliness to trying to lead a somewhat normal life, even though she's not a normal person. Her adventures at school, making friends, coming to be loved by this old couple who have not had children in their life. And it's also very humorous. Most of the incidents that happen are funny in some way or other. So it's really just a growing up story that's very nostalgic to many people. And so then you go to the movie, and I think I'm going to talk about a bunch of the changes that they did, but I really do think that the movie did an amazing job taking this and turning it into a movie that's entertaining, that moves through it without being boring, and still has that feeling of just day-to-day life. Sometimes, you'll see a scene transition from, they filmed it in Prince Edward Island, so there's the beautiful landscape, and you'll see it like shift from season to season, like a montage of time passing, because sometimes the book will just skip through time. They'll be going to school ends, summer comes, and then boom, they're back to school. So it kind of just moves through several years of Anne's life, kind of these formative from girl to woman years in her life. And the movie does such a great job of transitioning, hitting the high points, doing a really great job at most of the main incidents that happen. And the movie has several huge things going for it. It's well made, but also the casting is incredible. You could not have gotten a better Anne than Megan Follows. And then Matthew and Marilla, their actors just carry the film. I don't know of anybody who could watch that movie and not love Matthew. He's kind of the iconic heart of the book and of the movie. His character is a little different from the book to movie, but he is just as lovable in both. Probably love him even more in the movie, just because he's more, he's more there for you to love. Another huge advantage that the movie has, the book is beautifully written. It's a really well written book. It's smart, it's funny, it's engaging. It was not one of Ellen Montgomery's favorite books of hers, but I think it's her most famous for good reason. Not just the striking uniqueness of her character in Anne, but it is one of her better written books. She loved the Emily books more and like the Pat books, and those are just not on the same level as Anne of Green Gables. But another huge thing that movies just have as an advantage over books, I don't remember if I talked about this before or not, maybe I have, but one of the huge advantages that movies can have over books in their storytelling is the musical score. You think about, bad music can ruin a movie, and good music can help make a great movie. Good music, a good score, helps tell the story both consciously and subconsciously. Probably the ultimate example of this is, the Lord of the Rings movies, which I think are some of the greatest movies made largely because of the score, where the score actually tells the story and brings your emotions back. It tells an emotional story alongside of the story that you're actually seeing, and brings in all the different themes to bring everything together. That is an advantage that movies have over books, and great movies take advantage of it. The score for Anne of Green Gables, it's pretty simple. There's like the one main theme, and it just captures the feeling that the movie was going for so perfectly. It's beautiful, it's nostalgic. I think this is a nostalgic story for most people, but I do believe that even if you've never seen the movie and you turn it on and you hear that score, it will be nostalgic to you, because that's just the way the music is written. It's sad, it's beautiful, it fits perfectly the themes of the joy of finding a home and coming home for the first time, and also of changes and leaving things behind, the changes from childhood to adulthood. The theme often plays as time is passing. You see the seasons changing, and it's just a theme of how everything changes, and it's sad and beautiful at the same time, and it tells the story of the movie perfectly. So it's like, it is simple. There's not a ton of music in the movie, but what there is perfect and really helps make it. I love the music so much, I actually walked down the aisle to it in my wedding, because it's that perfect blend of the transitions of life. So that's one of my favorite things about the movie. But moving on to some of the changes between book and movie. Obviously, events have to be tweaked, turned around, and sped up to make the movie work. It is a pretty long movie, which is nice because they can really put a lot of stuff in there. One of the biggest differences is in making the movie and, dramatizing it a bit. They really emphasized and expanded the romance of Anne and Gilbert. This is something in the book that is a main theme but doesn't actually get touched on very often. Gilbert offends Anne when she first goes to school by calling her carrots because of her red hair. She gets so angry at him that she won't speak to him, and she doesn't speak to him really ever until the end of the book. They have one more kind of argument where he also gets angry at that point, because he's like trying to become friends with her, and she's just being a real brat about it. And eventually they have another fight, and he's like, okay, I'm done. And then they don't speak until they're both older, and it's kind of the end of the book. It used to bother me how much they changed that in the movie. In the movie, Anne is angry and haughty at him, but they still have multiple interactions throughout the movie. And that used to bother me. I was like, why are they doing this? This is so different. And it's almost like, Anne, of course, really did like him all along in the book, but she has such a hatred for him. She won't speak to him or have anything to do with him. She would never, ever admit that she actually likes him. Whereas, and Gilbert likes her, but at this age, he would really probably only have admitted it as a friendship. Whereas the movie really brings out this kind of half-acknowledged liking on both of their sides. There's clearly romantic thoughts going on both sides. And even though they're always sort of fighting, it's not, after the first part of the movie, it's not really about that first thing anymore. They've kind of moved past that, and they just have kind of a tense relationship where they do speak to each other, they do acknowledge each other. Sometimes Anne softens towards him and says nice things. I think that's partly because maybe the makers of the movie didn't want Anne to be quite as awful as she was towards him as she is in the book, but that is definitely a change because she's very awful to him. But I do understand why they did it, because it is difficult to have like your hero of the story who's barely in it. This is a problem Ella Montgomery really had, and the relationship between Anne and Gilbert is actually one of her better romances, I think, partly because they were eventually able to become friends, and so there was kind of this friendship for a while before it really moved into the romance. And she was definitely better at writing friendships. The funny thing about Ella Montgomery, she is an amazing writer of a lot of things. Romance is not one of them. She's actually really bad at romance for the most part. She can do humorous romances, but serious ones with her ideals of heroines and heroes really don't work well for her. She has a very hard time, particularly writing dialogue for her main characters. So she'll have like this hero who's in it, supposed to be important, but he's just not there and he's just not talking most of the time. Gilbert is a little more present, especially in the later books. Not this first one so much. It's really bad in like the Emily books where you have Teddy, who Emily's in love with, but he literally has like 2 lines throughout the books, like barely in it. And so Gilbert is in it a little bit more, but yeah, I do understand why they expanded his character. It annoys me at times, but it doesn't work too well in a movie to have there be a romantic interest that feels real, that you actually like know the guy without him ever hardly saying a word, you know? And so yeah, they add a lot of different moments with him. Also, in the book, even though they have very few exchanges, she is thinking of him. There will be like thoughts that she has about him, and the movie can't really show that. So maybe they added some extra interaction to kind of show, you know, he's in her mind. Like, he's at the back of her mind all the time. So yeah, there are 2 things that they changed that do bother me. One being, the biggest one being the incident at the Christmas ball. That never happens in the book. This time where Anne is kind of bragging to Diana's teasing her about Gilbert, and Anne is kind of bragging that she could make Gilbert do anything for her, and so Diana dares her to ask him to dance, or get him to ask her to dance, and Gilbert knows what's going on and completely snubs her. Is like, gives her a good solid snub, is rude. And maybe, you know, Anne had been so rude to him for so long, it's kind of like he finally gets a little bit back at her. But I really don't think this is true to either of their characters. And this is my part 1. I'm going to do the Anne of Avonlea next time. So I'm not going to get into some of his major character problems, because we don't really see his major character problem in this one. But that's a big one for me. I don't think in the first place that Anne would have done that. Partly because she just never would have spoken to Gilbert. She was not acknowledging him in any way at this time. And she just wasn't like that. She wouldn't have been thinking in that way and having that kind of, I don't know, that kind of arrogance. I mean, she is full of it a lot of the time. Anne's a very confident person, but I don't think she would have done that, and I don't think Gilbert would have responded like that. I think that's evidence partly of the way that they kind of changed his character. He's a little less solidly good-natured, I guess, than he is in the book. But yeah, I really don't like that scene. It's uncomfortable, and I don't think it's true to either of their characters. The other incident is after he saves her at the pond. He saves her from drowning, And in the book, this is where he finally lost his patience. And he asks her to be friends one more time. She almost says yes, but she snubs him. And he's like, okay, I'm done. He has a flare of temper in return. And after that, he ignores her as well. And then that's at the point where Anne really realizes that she has forgiven him. And she regrets that, but she doesn't do anything about it to try to be friends. And then they go for a few years of silence, not speaking to each other before the end. In the movie, this is just kind of another one of their interactions. They have a little bit of an argument. She runs off. She apologizes the next day. They have kind of a makeup. He basically asks her on a date. She says yes, and then falls through because she gets scared about, possibly making a commitment. So this is very different. They're like fully embarking on their romance already, when in the book, this was a part where they actually had a very solid break for a while. So those are the two things that kind of annoy me, the two major events that they changed. The rest of it, I don't mind so much, and I understand, because they needed to actually make him a prevalent character instead of just in the background like he is in the book. So that's for Gilbert. Diana is an interesting character, Anne's best friend. I think they did a pretty good job with her in the movie. Anne and Diana in the book are so different. They're different in the movie too, but I think their friendship is fun and sweet and a little bit sad, and it feels very real because they don't speak the same language. They become childhood friends and they're best friends, and they stay friends for life because of this bond of childhood, which I think adults should remember. You can be friends with people who are very unlike you. But they stay friends, I think, largely because of this childhood connection, because they are so different. Anne makes friends later on in the books who are much more like her. But Diana is not at all imaginative. Anne is full of fancies. Diana is very practical. Anne will talk about all these things. Diana just feels like she doesn't follow her most of the time. And this sometimes kind of frustrates Anne. But they are best friends and they love each other. And that's kind of the way their relationship works in the book. In the movie, they kind of tried to make Diana more on Anne's wavelength, I think, so that their friendship maybe works better. And it just feels a little odd because sometimes Diana feels like the Diana from the book, where she's very simple and straightforward, doesn't really get where Anne's going a lot of the time, and, but is very loyal and loving. And then there's this more complex, interesting type character that they're trying to do with her in the movie. But she's fine, so I feel like that didn't work great. But again, I kind of understand why they did it, to make her a little bit more like Anne, I guess. But pretty good character. Like I already said, Matthew and Marilla and Rachel Lynde are enough reason to watch the movies. Just right there. Their acting is incredible. Their just portrayals of their characters, it's not like acting. It's like these are just the people that they are. You feel like they are these real people in this time and place. The scenes just of Matthew doing his farming or sitting in the house, scenes of Marilla and Anne cooking in the kitchen, you feel like you've gone back to that time and are entering it. They are warm and real and flawed and funny. Yeah, could not have cast them better. They are amazing, really make the movie. So yeah, other differences. Anne's a little bit older than she is in the book. In the book, I think she starts at she's 11 or 12. And then in the movie, I think they start her at 14, which works better because Megan Follows was 16 when she played the role, but she was very small. And she's actually stayed very small, something that I think is funny. Later on in the movie, they have some of the quotes from the book. Something that's also really good about the movie is that a lot of the lines are direct quotes, which I always appreciate. But they have several people at various points talk about how tall Anne has gotten, because in the book, Anne grew to be a very tall woman, or a relatively tall woman. And I'm kind of like, maybe you could have left those lines out because Anne never grew an inch from the time that she got to Anne of Green Gables. She's a very small lady, but she works really well in the role because she's so tiny. She's a believable 14-year-old. She transitions really well. I think at the end of that first movie, she's 16. Transitions to that really well. And it's actually harder for me in the later movies to believe that she's grown up because she is such a tiny lady. But yeah, she works really well, the ages. And I think making her a little older works good because none of the stuff that happens, it's not like little child stuff. So I think making her a little older works really good with the actress they got. And again, that actress is just perfect for Anne. Her comedic timing, her comedic expressions, her temper, the way she just delivers Anne's overdramatic lines. You won't like Anne if you don't think she's funny because her character is largely humorous. You're supposed to laugh at her over-the-top ideals. And so, yeah. But she portrays it so well. Like, all her little expressions. Her offended expression is one of my favorites. But yeah, she's really, really good. As far as which is better, book or movie, they are both so good. Read the book, watch the movie. Even though the movie does such an amazing job of capturing the spirit of the book and the characters of the people, it still has a very different feel. The book is, the turns of phrase is a large part of it. Just the writing, the developing of the characters, particularly like Rachel Lynde, is a lot of fun. And again, there's a lot of things that happen that the movie didn't have time for. A lot of things that are changed. I can't go through everything that they changed, but there's a lot of little things. They bring in different parts from different books. And so, yeah, the Anne of Avonlea that I'm going to do in the next part is actually, even though it's called Anne of Avonlea, it's actually drawn mostly from the very end of the Anne of Avonlea book. And then mostly from Anne of the Island and Anne of Windy Poplars. Kind of its inspiration, but it really makes its own story. Anne of Green Gables, the first one, stays a lot truer to the book. Anne of Avonlea much more goes off on its own. But I will be talking about what I think about that one in my part 2 video. So those are my thoughts on Anne of Green Gables book versus movie. Both amazing. Honestly, I can't pick a favorite. Read and watch both because super good. Just a wholesome, heartwarming story with a lot of really great themes. It's humorous, but it's also really, really good. Just, I don't know. You just feel good watching it, I guess. And again, I really do believe, I have a lot of nostalgia for it, but I really do believe that it's a nostalgic experience for anyone, even if you didn't grow up with it. So, those are my thoughts on Anne of Green Gables book versus movie. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.